And now I would like to invite our next presenter, Anastasiia Okaievych. She will join us online. She's a military, and I'm really happy to welcome you here. We haven't seen for a while, but me and Anastasiia together taught TRiM for future officers. So, Anastasiia, the floor is yours. Thank you. Hello everyone, I'm really pleased to be here to connect after prize giveaway, and I had the chance to listen to a winner, a graduate of our institute, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to know that the TRiM is being publicly shared and implemented in the military. Now my report is about emotional and will resilience of future officers with integration of TRiM methods. So, air raid alarms, screams of children, bright light, being constantly overwhelmed by information on social media and many service-related tasks. Every day we are facing a great number of challenges which overwhelm our mentality. Can you remember at least one day since the war started when you were not affected by stressors, or at least one day when you didn't feel hatred towards the enemy? Most of us every day are affected by a variety of negative factors, starting from sleep deprivation and to moral reflections on how to protect your family. Am I doing enough in my place to bring the victory closer? War makes us develop new efficient ways to prepare both civilians and military to combat operations, ability to withstand the psychological load, being able to defend your country with weapon in your hand is all about emotional and will resilience. So what the emotional and will resilience is? It's about emotions and will. It's obvious. For example, after the air raid alarm is over, when you come home and you feel safe next to your family member, you can take a shower and prepare for your next day at work. You feel happy. While our cadets also enjoy a chance to sleep at least 2 hours at night. So, happiness is a response of a human being or an animal to satisfaction of needs. And a will is a key component of personality development when you are able to actively pursue your goal, overcoming both internal and external challenges. All of us want to be fit and healthy, but how many of you are willing to wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning when it pours outside to do your morning jogging? 10% maybe. How many officers and cadets are willing to start preparation for their physical exams few months before it, not a few weeks? Every time, often external or internal challenges make us change or cancel our plans. But is a future officer able, amidst of combat operations, to say, wait, the weather conditions are really poor, I'm not going to do my combat mission. I am afraid to assault in this direction to support the different units. We'll wait for further decisions. Of course, every person is unique, has unique behavioral model and makes unique decisions, but our task is to help future officers and navigate them towards development of emotional and will resilience, which will affect an officer's ability to make decisions and take ownership of these decisions. And education environment and higher military educational institutions is supposed to achieve it. Pain is a severe and tough test of all psychological and physical abilities of a soldier. Every soldier may face something they don't understand, feel something they have never felt before. And it's really important to understand that every person has unique and very specific experiences. So, what are positive responses during combat? It's not about patriotism, love to country, desire to seek revenge upon the enemy, and desire to complete a combat operation. There are also negative responses: fear of death, fear of injury, fear of being captured by an enemy, and fear to seem covered in the eyes of fellow soldiers. Before the start of the Russian-Ukrainian war in 2014, the system of military training was focused only on overcoming the fear of death and an ability to perform the combat task and to feel covered in the eyes of the fellow soldiers. But actually, the specific nature of Russian-Ukrainian war caused us to change these approaches. We have diagnosed mental conditions in military servicemen amidst hostility. You can see the more detailed information on the slide. We often ask them to respond to several blocks of questions. First, about participation on hostilities. Second part of the questionnaire was to obtain the material required to analyze the mental health condition of military servicemen, the reasons behind them, and their feelings before, during, and immediately after combat. And here it's important to remember that we have identified not just negative mental conditions, but also positive conditions, which were evenly distributed in a table, 10 items in each category. Based on the information we obtain, most military servicemen felt worry, 93%, willingness to take risk, 81%, and fear, 78%. During the first combat, the dominant mental health conditions were fear, 77%, worry, 68%, and willingness to take risk, 63%. Our results indicate that immediately after combat, the dominating mental health conditions were withdrawal, 63%, excitation, 55%, and happiness, 52%. If we summarize all this result, we can draw conclusions that the fear is a predominant negative mental health condition experienced by respondent at every stage of hostility. This is the reason why we have designed and conducted the second stage of our survey to better understand the nature of this fear. Our results demonstrate that immediately during combat, the key threats resulting in the feeling of fear are fear of injuries, a fear of being captured, a fear of losing fellow of their comrades, and a fear of being killed. Taking into account this data, we can come to a conclusion that the fear of being killed observed before the start of Russian-Ukrainian war is substituted by other sorts of fear, namely fear of injury and fear of captivity. In the current setting, and it mandates structural changes in the military training system. And so, based on the survey results, we are facing a question: how we can form emotional and will resilience in future officers. First of all, we need to realize that emotional and will resilience of future officers happens during training, with simulation of traumatizing factors approximated to real stressors. And here, regardless of discipline and trainings, instructors must introduce certain stressors. Here we see three key categories. Physiological stressors include sleep deprivation, poor hygienic conditions, dehydration, exhaustion, or insufficient muscle activity. Cognitive stressors include poor situational awareness, too much information or too little information, sensory overwhelmment, isolation, lack of time or prolonged waiting time, difficult choice or inability to make a choice. And the third stressors, emotional stressors, include anxiety, fear, grief, anger, boredom because of lack of activity, conflict of motives, and loss of faith. The more stresses we can simulate during training, the more future officers will be prepared to develop as much as possible coping tools or efficient behavioral models on how to act in a specific situation while on a mission. Along with it, we may simulate conditions of combat missions during trainings using symptoms or indicators of acute stress we use during TRiM interview. Unpleasant thoughts or memories about events, bad dreams about events, feeling as if event repeat itself, feeling of sadness because of reminders about event, bodily responses to reminders about events, sleep disorders, irritability or anger, issues with concentrations, increase awareness of potential threats for oneself, startling by unexpected sounds and dissociation symptoms. If we talk about a positive example of well-developed emotional and will resilience, we observe heroic deeds by officers during assault operations and defense operations. Ability to save lives of military personnel and successfully complete the task. The most valuable examples are military servicemen and officers and graduates of our academy who have survived the captivity, returned home alive, and continued the military service because they have experienced all types of stressors, from starvation to loss of faith in rescue. We also have a negative example of poorly developed emotional and will resilience. These are military personnel, unfortunately some officers, who betrayed Ukraine and defected to enemy side. How it's related to emotional and will resilience? Well, in most cases here we observe a tough choice and conflict of motives supported by emotions and resulted in such consequences. This is the reason why it's so important to successfully train military servicemen, incorporating as much stressors as possible. It will help to mitigate the actual risks during the actual service, where a cost of mistake is a human life. So, through using interactive training techniques and training technologies based on a professional specialization of future officers, we may develop and improve various personal and professional qualities, abilities, and skills of future officers through game simulation. And during development of emotional resilience, both personality and military experience of both administrative and the administrative personnel and faculty are crucial because they are to role model the behavior for future officers. Take into account the importance of emotional and stress resilience development and our powerful experience of using TRiM model and its profound evidence base. Our Department of Behavioral Science and Military Leadership has introduced a special educational process at Sahaidachnyi Institute of Land Forces, developed a train program on emotional and will resilience for future officers integrating TRiM method. This program will be included in the courses for all specialists trained at our institute, including infantry, artillery, engineering troops, tank troops, and engineering and logistic troops. Why it's so important? Why it's so important to train it to everyone? Because future officers, regardless of their specialization, after completing their training course at the military academy, will become commanders, directly responsible for psychological resilience and preparedness of their personnel. And here it's important to emphasize that if a commander understands the effects of combat on human mentality, knows how to deliver psychological first aid in combat, and how to screen personnel after combat, to identify those prepared to continue combat missions, we don't need to convince such commanders to change attitudes to preparation of personnel. Such commanders will be interested in it and will find ways and opportunities to organize proper training and proper workflows of ensuring mental health even at the company unit, not to mention the brigade level. The training program is designed for 10 days and consists of two complementary units: a theoretical unit delivered at the lecture room, and a field unit developed at the military training grounds. The theoretical units include the introduction to emotional and will resilience training, and second day emotional will resilience level regulation methods based on NATO member states' army experience. And then a field units is designed for 5 days, but lasting between 8 to 10 hours. It includes individual psychological training, group psychological training, stress vaccination to control mental health condition during fight with heavy armored vehicles, self-regulation techniques, and assessment of emotional and will resilience of military personnel under conditions approximated to actual combat conditions. So after this 9 days training, we implement the training on methods of regulation of emotional and will resilience using NATO member states' experience. The purpose of this training to enrich the toolkit of our cadets with emotional regulation techniques, and during these days the cadets will have a chance to learn with methods implemented in Israeli military, UK military, and United States military. Here we focus a special attention on a method used in the United Kingdom military, and namely TRiM method. For TRiM, we specifically dedicate day 8 and day 9 for practitioner training and for manager training. Future officers must receive both levels of training because they are also able to facilitate classes as part of the combat preparation course, and sometimes it's impossible to involve other instructors, including certified civilians. But during teaching this program, I believe it would be reasonable to also involve other certified instructors, including civilian instructors, to better understand the differences between civilian and military psychology and distribute the activities, which will be supported by further communication well-coordinated operations system. So this training program, supported by certified instructors and by our foreign partners, will help to ensure will help us to train significant number of professionals on TRiM system for armed forces of Ukraine, and subsequently it will help us to build high-quality TRiM system for every military unit. Since the more officers the unit will have, the higher the chance to successfully implement the system at the unit. A good example of it is training facilitated at the National Academy of Land Troops in May this year, where we have trained 90 future officers using TRiM methods, and they have successfully completed their certification thanks to our certified instructors, Viktor Dosenko, Angela Holovchenko, and very soon the graduates will be using this knowledge in practice when fulfilling their duty on moral and psychological support during combat operations. And please let us remember there are no people who are not afraid and who achieve everything with the first attempt, but you are the one who can control yourself and can control the situation. You are the one who makes decision to start changes, to introduce new and relevant methods, and the emotional formation of emotional will resilience in future officers using integrated TRiM methods will improve this very important, this crucial foundation on the way towards a victory. Glory to Ukraine. Thank you so much for your attention. Do you have any questions?